In 2024 December, during the 7th month of my pregnancy, I believed safety was something borrowed from trust. My daughter was still inside me, and the only person standing between stability and collapse was my aunt, Maribel, the woman who filled every absence my parents left behind. She reminded me daily that my condition made me fragile, and I secretly hated how true that felt. When illness forced her into bed, guilt whispered that I should not need anyone. I told myself independence was courage, not recklessness. Still, her voice stayed with me, soft but worried, asking me to be careful. At the time, I thought concern was love speaking too loudly. I did not yet understand that warnings sometimes arrive before understanding does. What unsettles me now is not desire, but certainty. The quiet belief that nothing bad could follow me into a familiar place that night at all ever. I remember the exact year, because it was the year everyone kept telling me how strong I was supposed to be. I was 7 months pregnant, carrying a child who listened to everything my body felt, and I was living with my Aunt Celestini, the only person who never asked me to explain how I ended up there. She spoke gently, like life could still be negotiated. When sickness confined her to bed, responsibility shifted onto my shoulders, and I told myself that independence was proof of adulthood, not a gamble. Her concern lingered in my thoughts, repeating warnings I pretended were excessive. The store was familiar enough to feel harmless. Its aisles were narrow, its lighting unforgiving, and its silence heavier than expected. I focused on cravings because cravings felt simpler than fear. When the woman spoke to me, her voice carried reassurance, the kind that sounds practiced. I noticed how easily she smiled, how naturally questions followed kindness. Each sentence felt maternal, but something in her interest lingered too long, as if curiosity had teeth. She asked about my husband, then the father, then my family, and I answered because politeness felt safer than refusal. With every response, my discomfort deepened, though I couldn't name why. Her concern grew sharper, less caring and more evaluative, like I was a problem being measured. She spoke of protection, of better care, of certainty in uncertain times. I told myself she was lonely. I told myself I was overreacting. What unsettled me was not what she said, but how she listened. Her eyes never rested. They moved as if memorizing exits, corners, spaces where witnesses might be absent. The store felt emptier with every passing moment. I reminded myself that public places don't breed danger, that fear requires isolation. Still, her words followed me through the aisles, layered with judgment, wrapped in concern that no longer felt optional. When she suggested solutions, they sounded rehearsed. A place away from noise. A life without struggle. A future where decisions were already made. I refused politely at first, then firmly, and finally with anger that surprised me. Her response changed instantly. The warmth drained from her voice, replaced by certainty that bordered on promise. She spoke about how quickly circumstances change, how fragile safety truly is, how absence invites opportunity. I told myself to leave. I told myself not to look back. The store returned to normal too quickly, as if nothing had happened. An employee smiled at me, and normality felt convincing again. In the parking lot, relief mixed with urgency. My thoughts racing faster than reason. I told myself fear had exaggerated everything. That discomfort was not danger. But later, memory refused to soften. Her questions replayed differently. Her concern sounded less like kindness and more like assessment. Days afterward, I learned about another woman, pregnant, alone, last seen in the same store. People called it coincidence. I call it pattern. Even now, when I think of that day, I don't remember her face as clearly as I remember the feeling of being chosen. The realization came slowly, like understanding a language after hearing it spoken for years. Predators do not always announce themselves with violence. Sometimes they arrive as answers to prayers never spoken aloud. Sometimes they wear patience like a disguise and ask questions that feel harmless until assembled. I wondered how many others had smiled back at her. How many had mistaken attention for mercy. I wondered if the store remembered her footsteps, if the aisles carried echoes of conversations that ended too quietly. That night, I lay awake listening to my own breathing, imagining it heard by someone else, measured, evaluated, claimed. I pressed my hands against my stomach and promised protection without knowing how fragile promises can be. The world did not feel cursed yet, only watched. And that, I would later learn, is how every true horror begins. I did not tell my aunt everything at first. I chose silence, believing restraint could erase threat. But fear is patient. It waits, growing louder when ignored. The woman's voice followed me into dreams, calm and certain, repeating offers that sounded like inevitability. By morning, I understood something irreversible had begun, even if I could not yet see its shape. Some encounters end when we walk away, but others continue, unfolding quietly, long after we believe we are safe again at home. The night after the Dollar Tree incident, I didn't sleep at all. Every time I closed my eyes, I was back in that restroom, counting breaths in the silence, remembering how the air felt heavy just before I noticed her above the stall. Even safe in my bed, I kept replaying the moment I looked up and met her eyes. I told myself it was over. I told myself I was home. My aunt stayed awake with me, sitting on the edge of the bed, her phone resting in her hands in case the police called back. They had taken my statement carefully, writing everything down, asking me to repeat her words. I noticed how their pens paused when I mentioned the baby, when I described how she said she wanted it. Some sentences are hard to process even when written slowly. The next morning, my aunt insisted on driving me everywhere. The grocery store, doctor appointments, even short walks. I watched people differently now, at checkout lines. I noticed who stood too close, in parking lots. I listened for footsteps that didn't match my own. The world felt thinner, as if something had peeled back a layer I could never put back. A week later, I saw the article. The headline was small, tucked between advertisements. A pregnant woman, late 20s, last seen at the same Dollar Tree outlet. I read the location twice, hoping I was mistaken. The words blurred when I reached the part about her never returning home. No suspects, no leads. I couldn't stop thinking about the questions the old woman asked me in the store. How long I'd lived with my aunt, where my parents were, whether anyone else was looking after me. At the time, they felt personal but harmless. Now they felt like measurements, like preparation. I began to understand that what frightened me most wasn't her strength, or even her persistence. It was her patience. She never rushed me. She never raised her voice. She framed every threat as concern. Even in the restroom, even when she leaned toward me, she spoke as if offering help. Some nights, I heard her voice in my thoughts, repeating the same phrases. You shouldn't be alone. Life is uncertain. I will take good care of you. I hated how calm it sounded. I hated how easily memory could recreate it. My aunt tried to reassure me. She reminded me that the police had searched the area, that nothing like this had happened again. But then the report existed, and reports mean patterns sometimes form too late. I wondered how many women had listened before me, how many had accepted the offer. Months passed. My daughter was born healthy. Holding her grounded me, but it also sharpened the fear. Every stranger's smile felt like an unasked question. Every compliment carried weight. I learned to give less of myself away. Short answers. Polite distance. Silence when silence felt safer. Sometimes, when I drive past the Dollar Tree, I feel the urge to check the aisles, as if memory could still be standing there, waiting with a caring smile. I never go inside. I don't need to. I already know how easily danger can disguise itself as concern. The police never found the woman from the article. Her name stopped appearing in the paper. Life moved on in her absence. Mine didn't. It learned instead. What stayed with me was the realization that some predators don't chase. They observe. They listen. They collect details like invitations. And once they have enough, they don't need force. I tell this story now because I survived by saying no. Because I recognized the moment when kindness became entitlement. Because someone else might hear the same gentle voice, asking the same careful questions. And if you do, remember this. You owe no one your story. You owe no one answers. Some doors stay locked not because of fear, but because of wisdom. I locked mine that day. And whatever followed me out of that store has never been allowed inside again. I was 13 years old when the Dollar Tree became a place I still can't pass without remembering how fear learned my name. That year, my house felt divided long before the divorce papers were signed. Voices lowered when I entered rooms. Silence grew heavy where laughter used to live. I learned to disappear into my sketchbooks, trading loneliness for charcoal dust and cheap acrylics. The Dollar Tree, 3 blocks from home beside the highway gas station, became my refuge because it asked for nothing but pocket change. I went there often, riding my bike in the afternoons when the sun felt lazy and the store felt half asleep. That day, I arrived around 3, the hour when the cashier barely kept his eyes open, an aisle stretched empty like long thoughts. I parked my bike where I always did and stepped inside, breathing in the familiar mix of plastic and cleaning supplies. The art section had a sale. I remember feeling relieved, like the universe was briefly being kind. I didn't notice him at first. I was choosing charcoal pencils when a hiccup cut through the quiet. It sounded too close. I turned and found him standing behind me, close enough that I could count the beads in his hair. He was dressed like Jack Sparrow, badly, as if he'd copied the idea without understanding the character. The space between us felt wrong. I shifted away and apologized out of habit. He said he'd already seen me. His voice dragged, words slipping over each other. I thought he was joking until I smelled the alcohol. His eyes didn't focus the way they should. When I asked why he was dressed like that, his expression changed, confusion sliding into something sharper. He insisted he was Jack Sparrow. When I laughed, unsure how else to respond, his face hardened, as if I'd broken a rule I didn't know existed. He demanded respect, demanded acknowledgement. I answered honestly, cruelly, because I was young and didn't yet understand how fragile strangers can be. I walked away expecting him to follow, but he didn't. That absence felt like relief. At the register, I scanned the store again. He was gone. I paid quickly and stepped back outside, thinking the worst was over. That's when I realized my bike wasn't where I'd left it. The parking lot felt darker than it should have, lights blinking like tired eyes. Laughter rolled out of the shadows, sharp and delighted. A bicycle bell rang, slow and deliberate. My chest tightened. I knew that sound. I walked forward, because I didn't want to go home without my bike, because pride is dangerous when fear hasn't finished teaching its lessons. At the far end of the lot, he sat on my bike. I couldn't see his face clearly, but I didn't need to. His posture told me everything. When he noticed me, his voice cracked the air. He shouted something obscene, something mocking. And then he started pedaling toward me. I ran. The sound of my own bike chasing me was unbearable. His laughter followed, growing louder, closer, enjoying the game. I ran past the store, past the gas station, straight onto the highway, where the heat pressed down and the road stretched endlessly. I could hear him behind me, promising he would catch me, promising it like a joke. My legs burned. My breath came apart. I thought I would fall. Then I saw the truck. I waved my arms and screamed until my throat hurt. The horn answered me. When I turned back, he had stopped. The joy drained from his face, replaced by something cold. He looked at the truck, then at me, and made a decision. He kicked my bike to the ground and disappeared into the woods. The truck driver took me home. I didn't speak. For days after, I stayed inside. Even now, the sound of a bicycle bell makes my stomach tighten. I never told anyone because I knew how it would sound. A joke, a costume, a misunderstanding. But I know what chased me that day. And I know it was never funny. The nightmare didn't end that afternoon. It only changed shape. I had thought the Jack Sparrow figure vanished, that my bike and my heart would return to safety. But shadows have a way of following footsteps, and memories can twist into monsters. 1 week later, I dared to step outside again. My parents' arguments had quieted, but the world felt emptier, thinner, as if it were holding its breath. I rode my bike back to Dollar Tree, not for shopping, but for courage, for proof that the horror had been temporary. The lot was the same, yet nothing felt familiar. Light flickered over cracked asphalt. A faint laughter echoed, not from any person I could see, but from the space between the shadows. My chest tightened, muscles frozen with anticipation. I told myself it was imagination, a trick of memory playing cruelly. And yet, I felt him before I saw him, the drunken, twisted Jack Sparrow. Sitting silently on my bike, tilting it slightly, as if it had been waiting for me all this time. I froze, my hands tightened around the handlebars. The air smelled of stale whiskey and cold metal. He didn't speak at first, just tilted his head, wide eyes glinting with amusement and menace. Then, slowly, the hiccup came, cutting through the silence like a knife. I wanted to turn and run, but something heavier than fear held me in place. "You shouldn't have come back," he rasped, voice thick with malice. My heart pounded like a drum in the empty lot. "I told you. I'll catch you. I tried to speak. Words failed. The world had shrunk to the distance between us. He pedaled once, softly, almost mockingly, a warning that he could close the space at any moment. I remembered that first afternoon, how every sound had been amplified, every shadow elongated, every heartbeat a countdown. The truck had saved me then, but now there was no truck, no driver, no escape route, only him, and the laughter that had once belonged to a prank, now sharpened into threat. I thought of home, of safety, but the lock refused to release me. Suddenly, the air shifted. A breeze carried the sound of another bell, faint, distant, and yet familiar. My mind connected the impossible dots. The Jack Sparrow figure, my stolen bike, the laughter. This wasn't random. This was a ritual. A dark play I had unknowingly stepped into. My fear turned into a scream. But it caught in my throat. He leaned closer, whispering, "Run if you can. But you know I'll find you." The voice was no longer drunken or careless. It was precise, a promise embedded in every syllable. My legs moved on their own. I ran past aisles, past light poles, past the edges of sanity itself. Every pedal stroke he mimicked in the empty spaces around me. I glanced back, heart hammering, and saw him vanish, not retreating, but dissolving into shadows, leaving only the echo of his laughter and the memory of his eyes. I returned home that day, broken in a way invisible to anyone else. I didn't sleep. I didn't ride my bike for weeks. And yet, every night, I hear the bell. Every night, the laugh comes again. Closer than before, reminding me that some horrors don't end, they only wait for the next ride. I worked at Dollar Tree for 6 months, long enough to learn how silence behaves when it thinks no one is listening. This happened several years ago, when I was still a cashier and still believed routine meant safety. Our store sat in a quiet area, far enough from main roads that nighttime felt heavier there. Most evenings were uneventful, especially near closing, and after a few months, I was sometimes scheduled to work alone. Management was always trying to hire more people, but on the nights I was by myself, nothing bad ever seemed to happen. Until it did. I usually worked night shifts, staying until 10 p.m., when the doors locked and the lights dimmed just enough to signal the end of the day. One particular night was rainy, the kind where the sky couldn't decide what it wanted. The windows at the front of the store looked out onto the parking lot, and I kept noticing the way the rain came and went, tapping lightly against the glass. After 8, customers stopped coming in. The rain had kept them home. I stayed busy organizing shelves, straightening aisles, and scrolling through my phone to make the time pass. The last hour always felt slow, but comforting in its predictability. By 9, I was already thinking about going home. That night, after 9 o'clock, no one came in at all. I felt a familiar nervousness settle in. The kind that comes from being the only employee in a building full of blind spots. But I told myself it was fine. It always was. Around 9:15, headlights cut through the rain. A car pulled into the parking lot. Until then, my own car had been the only one there. This one was older, a dark blue 4-door sedan, and it parked in the closest space to the store. I watched a man step out. He was bigger than average, wearing a blue raincoat and a grey and red baseball cap. He walked toward the entrance, and I stayed behind the register, pretending to focus on my phone. He wandered the aisles without urgency, not picking anything up. A few minutes later, he moved toward the front of the store. When he got close, I looked up, caught his eye briefly, smiled, and said hi. The way I was trained to. He didn't respond. He looked away, walked straight to the exit, and left. I watched him get back into his car and drive off. The parking lot was empty again. By 9:30, I did my closing walkthrough, checking aisles and displays, then decided to clean the floors so I could leave right at 10. No one came in while I worked. At 9:50, I finished, went back to my check-in, and watched the clock on my phone tick down minute by minute. At 9:58, headlights appeared again. The same car pulled into the parking lot. I knew it immediately. There was no mistaking it. But this time, he didn't park near the entrance. He drove past the store and parked right next to my car, far away on the edge of the lot, up against the curb. His car blocked my view of my own. I told myself, he must have forgotten something. That explanation felt thin, but I accepted it anyway. He didn't get out. He stayed in his car with the engine running. At 10 p.m., I locked the doors, never taking my eyes off the parking lot. He didn't move. I clocked out, then returned to the front, expecting to see his car gone. It wasn't. The engine was still running. That's when the feeling turned sharp. There were closer spaces. Better spaces. Yet he had chosen the one beside me. I considered walking out anyway, but something inside me refused. I sat back down and waited, checking every minute. 30 minutes passed. He was still there. At 10:30, I texted my friend Brina. She lived nearby. When she offered to pick me up, I agreed immediately. I told her to come to the front doors. When her car pulled in, I left the store and got in fast. We drove away. The man didn't follow. Later, when we returned, his car was gone. I still think about that night. About what he was waiting for. And how close I came to finding out. The night after the man in the blue raincoat had lingered beside my car, I could not sleep. My body trembled with memory, every image replaying in my mind like a broken film. I kept picturing his hunched figure behind the wheel, cap pulled low, eyes hidden in shadow, waiting for me to come out. My hands had sweated through the sheets as I imagined him leaning forward, his face breaking into that same half-smile that had haunted me before. Every tick of the clock sounded like his heartbeat. I told myself it was only fear, that the world had not yet conspired to trap me in some private terror. But when I closed my eyes, I could see the dark sedan, its engine purring, headlights dimly glinting off the wet asphalt, just like yesterday. By evening, I resolved to go back. I told myself I had to check the store, make sure everything was in order, and maybe, just maybe, confront my own fear. The rain had started again, soft at first, sprinkling against the windows, and every drop sounded like a tiny drumbeat, counting down some unseen ritual. Walking into the store, I tried to focus on tasks, ranging shelves, counting stock, sweeping the floors. Yet my mind kept drifting to the parking lot. I would glance at the front windows, and every reflection seemed to contain a pair of eyes I didn't recognize. About 20 minutes into my shift, I noticed the headlights. Dim, steady, positioned in the same exact spot where the man had parked last night. My stomach dropped, muscles tightening involuntarily. He had returned. I froze, unsure whether to leave immediately or stay. trapped between logic and fear. I told myself that perhaps he had nothing planned, that he was just passing time. But instinct screamed otherwise, whispering a warning I could not ignore. His presence was a weight in the air, pressing down, unrelenting. I moved slowly to the front register, keeping my eyes on the car. He did not leave. He did not move. Just sat, patient, observing. It was unnerving in a way that went beyond the ordinary. Time seemed to stretch. Seconds became minutes. Minutes became hours, though only half an hour had passed. My pulse pounded so loudly I feared he could hear it, that somehow he already knew my fear. Every instinct in my body screamed for me to run, but I was paralyzed by the thoughts that stepping outside would make him act. My phone buzzed. Bria. My friend, my lifeline, sensing my unease from the previous night. I whispered through the receiver, voice barely audible over the sound of rain, explaining what I saw. "Don't move," she said firmly. "I'll be there in 5 minutes. Stay inside. Lock the doors. Wait for me." 5 minutes of terror stretched like an eternity, and I paced the floor, checking the windows constantly, feeling his gaze even when I could not see him. Finally, headlights cut through the wet darkness of the parking lot. Relief surged through me, yet fear lingered, sharp and jagged. I approached the door cautiously, not daring to glance at the dark sedan. Brenna's car slowed beside mine. I darted to the passenger seat, and she drove us away swiftly, leaving the ominous vehicle behind. I dared not look back, yet I could feel its presence lingering in the rearview mirror, a silent, watchful sentinel. That night, at home, I could not sleep. Shadows in my room seemed to twist, stretching like long, dark fingers. Every sound, the tapping of rain against the window, the distant hum of traffic became a threat. I imagined the man's eyes piercing through the glass, waiting, knowing, patient. It was then I realized the terror had followed me home. It had become something more than a man. It had become a shadow, a living whisper in my mind. Days passed, but I could not forget. Every time I stepped into the parking lot, even during daylight, I felt him there. I imagined his eyes on me in every reflection, in every window. I would glance over my shoulder constantly, expecting to see the blue raincoat emerge from the mist, expecting the grey and red cap to appear like a predator's snarl. Sleep was fractured, my dreams populated with that silent, relentless stare. Even now, weeks later, every time I hear a car engine or the faint hiss of rain against pavement, my heart skips a beat. I cannot explain why he had chosen me, why he had waited, why he had returned. And I know, deep down, that it is not over. The man in the blue raincoat is still out there, still waiting, a shadow in the night, patient and silent. And when I least expect it, he will come again, as sure and as unstoppable as the rain itself. The night everything went wrong began like any other shift, and that is what still terrifies me the most. I was 16 years old when I started working at the local supermarket, a quiet place in a comfortable part of town where most customers were elderly couples or wealthy families who never rushed. I had worked there for almost 3 years, long enough to believe nothing truly dangerous could happen under those bright fluorescent lights. That belief died on June 24, 2008. I was scheduled for an 8-hour shift that evening, working until 11. The first few hours passed uneventfully, filled with routine scans and polite conversations. Around 6 o'clock, the rain began. Not a gentle drizzle, but a heavy, relentless downpour that hammered against the roof and drowned the parking lot in silver reflections. When my meal break arrived, I realized I had left my wallet in my car. I decided to run for it without an umbrella, telling myself it would only take 10 seconds. I was wrong. By the time I came back inside, my clothes clung to me, soaked and cold. I bought a snack and went upstairs to dry off, waiting until the chill faded from my skin. When I returned to the sales floor, the store felt strangely empty. It was only 7:30, yet there were barely any customers. I told myself the rain had driven people home. I stepped into my check stand and started chatting with my coworker Maria, talking about her kids while helping the occasional customer who had braved the storm for essentials. The lights flickered once, then again. Thunder rolled somewhere far away. I tried to ignore it. At one point, I left the register to check the shelves and glanced outside. Near the dumpsters behind the store, I saw two dogs tearing into an overturned trash bin. Behind them, the bushes moved, not wind. Something slower, jerky. The dogs suddenly froze and began growling, their bodies stiff with fear. "Joanna, come help me," Maria called. When I looked back, the dogs were gone. I couldn't explain it. One moment they were there, the next they had vanished completely. I felt unsettled but said nothing. We finished closing tasks, and soon it was past closing time. Victor, the night cleaner, arrived to mop the floors. He lived behind the store and always worked late. He noticed my nerves and asked if I was all right. I lied and said I was just tired. When my shift ended, I stepped outside near the exit to smoke. The highway was empty, bordered by dark woods that seemed thicker in the rain. The streetlights cast long shadows across the asphalt. As I lit my cigarette, I saw them, two enormous yellow eyes staring back at me from the bushes. I couldn't breathe. "Joanna, you forgot your phone," Victor shouted. I ran inside just as lightning struck, plunging the store into darkness. Maria lit candles while thunder shook the walls. My voice trembled as I told them something was outside. Something that had been watching us. They didn't believe me. Victor grabbed a mop and flashlight, insisting on checking. Against every instinct, I followed. He poked the bushes, and the light revealed a shape that should not exist. A massive, cat-like creature with huge glowing eyes and ears that rose like twisted antlers. When the power returned, we saw its full form. It stood upright, jaw dripping, teeth exposed. Victor ran. I ran. Maria didn't make it. The creature tore her apart in seconds. We survived. She did not. And whatever that thing was, it is still out there. The next night, sleep refused me. I kept seeing Maria's face, her wide eyes, frozen in disbelief. Every shadow in my bedroom became a creature, every creak in the floor a warning. I couldn't go back to the supermarket, not yet, but something told me it was not finished with us. Victor claimed he would return in the morning to check the store, but I refused. I had learned the hard way that curiosity could be fatal. The storm returned around 10, relentless, dripping through the trees like a warning from the woods. I tried to convince myself it was just the weather, just the memory of the previous night. But deep inside, a cold dread twisted in my stomach. I decided I had to see for myself what had emerged from the bushes, what had killed Maria. I drove slowly toward the supermarket, headlights cutting through the rain in thin, trembling beams. My hands gripped the wheel until they ached. Every minute, I expected to see those yellow eyes peering from the dark, following my path. When I arrived, the parking lot was empty, except for the puddles reflecting the dull fluorescent glow from the windows. I parked and stepped out, rain soaking my jacket instantly. My heart hammered, but I forced myself forward. I reached the back of the store, the dumpsters, the bushes. The ground was slick with mud and leaves, and I could see deep, wet paw prints or something like them pressing into the earth. They were too large for any dog I had ever seen. And they ended abruptly, leading straight into the forest. I whispered Maria's name. The woods answered with silence. But then I saw something moving, subtle at first, just a flicker behind the trees. My breath caught. Two glowing eyes blinked slowly, unnervingly. The creature had returned. Its outline was bigger now, more defined. The thin layer of fur around its neck shimmered wet, and its elongated jaw flexed in anticipation. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but I couldn't. Something compelled me to watch. It stepped forward. The forest floor cracked beneath its weight. I could see its claws, black as oil, scraping against tree bark. Its antler-like ears twitched, and it studied me, calculating. I fumbled for my phone, but it was useless in my shaking hands. Lightning flashed, and for a moment, I saw every detail. Its feline face, the sleek sphinx-like body, the sharp, human-like intelligence in its gaze. I heard a voice, impossibly soft, carried by the wind. "You shouldn't have come back." I stumbled, tripping over roots, and the creature lunged, not at me not yet but closer to the edge of the trees, as if guarding something I couldn't see. I froze, realizing the horrific truth. Maria hadn't been the only target. Whatever this thing was, it had been hunting, learning, and tonight, I was part of its game. Victor appeared suddenly, emerging from the store with a flashlight and mop. "Joanna, run!" he screamed. The creature's head swiveled toward him, eyes narrowing. Victor swung the mop, a feeble attempt, but the thing didn't flinch. Instead, it hissed, a sound like grinding metal and low thunder combined, echoing through the forest. I felt the cold brush of fear along my spine as I realized we had no weapons that could stop it. We ran, slipping through mud and rain, but the creature followed silently. Its footsteps too light, too fast to hear. The yellow eyes reflected in every puddle, in every window we passed. Each flash of lightning revealed its immense form, and each time, I felt my courage dissolve. It was patient, watching us, enjoying the hunt. Finally, we reached my car. My fingers trembled as I unlocked the doors. Victor shoved me inside, and we sped away, tires slicing through rainwater. In the rearview mirror, I saw it step back into the shadows, dissolving like smoke into the woods, waiting. The memory of Maria's scream echoed, louder than thunder. We drove in silence, soaked and shaking, knowing we had survived but not understanding why. That night, the storm raged, but so did the knowledge that this creature still prowled behind the supermarket, its yellow eyes blinking in the dark, always watching, always waiting. And I knew if I ever returned there, it would not hesitate. I have not returned. I never will. And I pray that no one else does. The afternoon I walked to the dollar store, I didn't realize the terror waiting for me had already begun. The walk was routine, A short 10-minute stroll from my apartment, past familiar streets that I had memorized. The kind of streets you barely notice anymore, because nothing unusual ever happens there. That day, the clouds hung low, grey and heavy, though the rain had not yet begun. I liked this dollar store because it was quiet, predictable, and inexpensive. The aisles smelled faintly of plastic and cleaning detergent, fluorescent lights humming softly overhead, casting everything in an artificial clarity that somehow made the shadows sharper. Only a handful of other customers drifted through the store that afternoon, moving slowly, their attention elsewhere, like shadows of real people rather than actual humans. I grabbed a basket and walked toward the back of the store, mentally listing the items I needed. Cleaning wipes, a new dish sponge, and a couple of cheap notebooks. That's when I saw him. He was standing there as if he had materialized from the shadows themselves, leaning slightly, holding a brown beer bottle loosely in one hand, another bottle sticking conspicuously from his pocket. He wore a green sweater that seemed ill-chosen for his stiff posture, and pants that looked too formal for his dull, grimy appearance. He didn't appear homeless, but he wasn't clean, wasn't tidy. Something about him was off, not immediately terrifying, but strange enough to make my skin crawl. He didn't shop, didn't move, didn't look at the shelves. He just stood there, sipping his beer, swaying slightly, staring into nothing. I pretended to browse a few items nearby, stealing glances at him. The store didn't sell alcohol, which made him feel like an intruder, an unexpected presence that didn't belong in the quiet order of fluorescent-lit aisles. Another customer passed, shooting him a wary glance, hurriedly avoiding him. I felt my chest tighten. A store employee approached, calmly but firmly telling him he needed to leave. He argued briefly, his jaw tight, eyes flashing, then stormed out with the door slamming in a way that echoed like a warning. I finished my shopping as quickly as I could. 5 items in a bag, nothing significant. The cashier smiled politely as I left, and I tried to push the encounter out of my mind. Outside, the air was cooler now, the shadows stretching longer along the cracked sidewalk. I started my walk home, listening to the rhythm of my own footsteps, thinking I was safe. But then, ahead, he was there again. The same man. The green sweater, the dull dress pants, the angry eyes. He stood by a mailbox, one hand holding a beer bottle, shoulders tense, radiating menace. His gaze locked on me, and it didn't waver as I drew closer. I forced a polite smile and asked how he was doing, but his expression didn't change. Only his lips curled in a sharp curse that made my stomach drop. I tried to continue walking past him, but his presence was suffocating, and suddenly I felt the weight of danger pressing in. He asked where I thought I was going. I told him I was heading home, my voice tight and shaky. Then his footsteps matched mine, deliberate, unyielding, following my every move. When I turned to face him, his face was twisted with rage, eyes burning with a cold fury I had never seen before. I told him I didn't want trouble, that I was just walking home, hoping that reason might calm him. But his voice rose again, cursing, sharp, unrelenting. He was not drunk, not stumbling, but his erratic behavior made him more dangerous than any drunkard could be. I kept moving, trying to stay calm, but as I took another step, his hand shot out and grabbed my shoulder, tugging me back with terrifying strength. Fear exploded inside me. I wrenched free, my heartbeat racing, legs pumping furiously As I sprinted down the sidewalk, I could hear him behind me, faster than my own fear, gaining with every step. My lungs burned, sweat poured down my back, and I dared not look back again. The world narrowed to the rhythm of my own footfalls, the pounding in my chest, and the sound of his approaching footsteps. Finally, I reached my apartment building, flinging open the door, and stumbled inside. He did not follow me past the threshold, stopping at the edge of my perception, but I knew he was there in the world outside, waiting, watching. I locked the door behind me, trembling, heart hammering, realizing for the first time that the ordinary streets I walked every day were not as safe as I had thought. Something had crossed the line from strange to dangerous that day, and I had survived it by mere luck. I sat against the door, shivering, and wondered what would have happened if he hadn't let me go, if he had followed me further, if the shadows themselves had decided to claim me. The memory lingered, a dark pulse in my mind. And even now, when I walk past familiar streets, I can feel him there, in some corner of my vision, waiting. The evening after the encounter, sleep felt impossible. Every shadow in my apartment seemed alive. Every creak of the building made me jump. I replayed the man's face in my mind, the cold fury in his eyes, the way his hand had latched onto my shoulder like a trap. I could still feel it, the weight of that touch, the warning it carried. I told myself it was over, that he hadn't followed me inside, that I had escaped. But instinct whispered a darker truth. He had noticed me. He knew where I lived. The next morning, I tried to pretend the world was normal. I made coffee, fed my cat, and stared out the window at the same sidewalk I had sprinted down the day before. It looked harmless, ordinary, yet my gut clenched in terror every time a passerby walked too close, every time a car slowed near my building. My apartment felt smaller, constricting, as if the walls themselves were pressing in, listening, aware. I kept my phone in hand constantly, imagining a text, a call, anything that would warn me that he was nearby again. By afternoon, the compulsion to leave my apartment was overwhelming. I had to buy groceries, some mundane items, a ritual return to normalcy. I debated whether to walk, whether to take a cab, whether to risk the streets at all. Eventually, I decided on the walk, telling myself that the 10-minute route had always been safe, that the man in the green sweater was just a coincidence, a single moment of unreason. I didn't consider it irrational until the moment I saw him. There he was, 10 feet ahead of me on the sidewalk, leaning against a mailbox, his posture casual yet charged with menace. The green sweater seemed to pulse in the fading sunlight, and his eyes locked onto me immediately. My chest seized. I froze, the air thickening around me, the world shrinking to the distance between us. He had not moved an inch since yesterday. It was impossible. I had crossed the distance, looked away, and yet he was there, waiting. I forced myself to move, slow steps, careful, trying to appear unconcerned. He cursed under his breath, low and throaty, a sound that seemed to vibrate against my bones. I passed him, heart hammering in my ears, but his hand shot out, again catching my shoulder, firm, unyielding. Panic erupted in me, pure, consuming. I tore free, sprinting toward the relative safety of my apartment, adrenaline fueling my every movement. Halfway there, I tripped over the cracked sidewalk, scraping my palms, skin burning, knee stinging. He was behind me instantly, laughing, the sound sharp, malevolent, echoing down the narrow street. I scrambled to my feet, my bag of groceries bouncing against my leg, and ran harder. Every nerve screamed for survival. My legs felt like lead, lungs on fire. The city around me blurred. The world had reduced to predator and prey, and I was prey. I reached the front steps of my building, fingers trembling as I fumbled for the keys. Behind me, I could hear him, closer, each step deliberate, punctuated by low curses that made my stomach churn. I shoved the key into the lock and twisted, hoping the door would yield before he reached me. The lock clicked, and I wrenched the door open, throwing myself inside. The hallway was dimly lit, silent, almost sacred in its emptiness. I bolted the door behind me, sliding down to the floor, gasping, heart hammering like a drum of doom. Minutes passed, my breathing slowed, but the terror remained, a shadow wrapped around my spine. I peeked through the peephole. The sidewalk was empty. No man, no green sweater. But the fear did not leave. I knew he had been there. Knew he had tracked me. And I knew this was only the beginning. Days after, I avoided the streets, my apartment becoming a cage. Every sound, every movement outside, sent my pulse skyrocketing. Friends called, asked if I wanted to meet, to distract myself, but I refused. The man in the green sweater had changed everything. The streets no longer belonged to me. The familiar pathways now dangerous, haunted. I kept my windows shut, lights dim, curtains drawn. Every reflection in glass, every passing shadow, brought a chill to my soul, a reminder that he could return at any moment. The final blow came one night, when I finally convinced myself to walk to the corner store for necessities. A familiar green flash caught my eye in the periphery, and my blood ran cold. My heart shattered as I realized the man was following, silently, patiently, always outside the edge of sight, watching, waiting. I ran the final block, chest heaving, keys clutched like a weapon. This time, I didn't look back. I have never walked that route again. I have never forgotten the green sweater, the angry eyes, the way he could appear and vanish, a predator weaving in and out of reality. Even now, I sleep with lights on, doors locked, and every unfamiliar footstep outside my apartment triggers the memory. I know one day, if I am not careful, the man in the green sweater will return, and next time, escape might not be an option. The screams began even before we stepped through the sliding glass doors, though no one else seemed to hear them. It was as if the fluorescent lights themselves trembled at the anger that waited inside. I loved going to Dollar Tree. It had always been a sanctuary for our small family, a place where money stretched farther and the children could laugh without restraint. Thomas had just gotten a new job, and he insisted we treat ourselves. The kids' excitement was contagious, their feet pounding across the linoleum as they ran ahead to the toy section. Martin clutched a helicopter, Gwen a warplane. They had plotted their choices beforehand, their coordination innocent and joyful. I wandered past the shelves, feeling the weight of our modest life pressing on me. Each dollar spent here mattered, every little treasure counted. I spotted the picture frame I had admired weeks ago, the last one in the store, glinting like a promise. My fingers itched to lift it, to finally place our family's image next to my bed, to see it every night before sleep, a quiet reminder of what we were fighting to protect. But the moment I touched it, the first scream erupted. A woman lunged, her hands violent and unforgiving. "Hey, I saw it first. Get your filthy hands off." She snapped, large, stocky, her posture threatening. the brand of her clothing shimmering like a mask of wealth. Her gym outfit clung to her, a perverse mockery of casualness. She was clearly affluent, and her anger burned hotter than any fire. My blood ran cold. I stammered, "I know, you grabbed it first." She laughed, sharp and cruel. "I'm not going to argue with a low-class cockroach like you. Go make your husband lunch." Her smile was wide, a predator's grin, and I felt an ancient pulse of fury ripple through her veins. Something inside me snapped. I am usually calm, patient, the voice of reason. But when someone threatens my family, a storm awakens in me. I slapped her hand away, took the frame, and spun on my heel. "And by the way," I hissed, "if you're so wealthy, don't come shopping at Dollar Tree." The scream of her rage followed us. Her face turned red as a ripe tomato, veins protruding like black serpents beneath her skin. In a heartbeat, the ordinary woman transformed into a hulking, enraged gorilla, a wild creature poised to leap at us. I gathered my children close, ignoring her theatrical display, and walked past her as if the shadows themselves shielded us. Thomas muttered something, but I silenced him with a look. When I dared glance back, she was gone, vanished into the aisles, leaving only the echo of her fury. We moved toward the register, the mundane clinking of coins and scanning of items drowned by a sense of lurking doom. But the terror was far from over. Outside, she waited, breathing heavily. Her eyes ablaze, scanning for weakness. The air was thick, each inhale a struggle. The world narrowing to the space between our car and her seething presence. When we reached the car, reality shattered further. The tires wouldn't move. Someone had punctured them. Her furious banging echoed against the metal, not attempting entry but intent on destruction. Thomas stepped forward, rage meeting rage, but she was a force beyond human comprehension. A taser crackled, striking him. An iron pipe landed on his knee, crushing him to the pavement. She pressed her foot to his face as if eradicating a cockroach. I lunged to intervene, but a strike to my abdomen sent me to the ground, pain coursing like molten steel. She laughed, iron pipe smashing into my knee. The world blurred with screams, our children huddled inside the car, Thomas writhing, me crawling desperately. Then the ultimate horror. She returned with a bucket of gasoline, pouring it over the vehicle. Flames danced in my mind, the smell of fire yet to come, the terror of helplessness paralyzing me. My screams joined the chorus of the night, a desperate, pleading sound. Thomas tried to stop her, but she was everywhere at once, a human tempest of madness. And then, salvation came suddenly. A man rammed her. Another pulled the children from the car. The spell of violence broke. The chaos alerted the few shoppers inside. The police arrived seconds later. She was seized, a wild animal finally contained. Even in the aftermath, the shadow of that night lingered. Thomas and I lay sore and shaken, the echo of her screams haunting our minds. Yet, the world had changed slightly in our favor. Neighbors, strangers, and donors offered help. And for the first time, we felt a fragile safety. A reprieve from the darkness that had descended so suddenly, so violently. The air after the attack was thick with smoke and tension, as if the store itself were holding its breath. I could feel the weight of that enraged woman's fury lingering like a poison, wrapping around every aisle and every shadow. Even the children were pale, their small hands clutched tightly to Thomas and me. We had survived, yes, but survival carried a price. and I sensed the storm was far from over. It began the moment we tried to leave. The tires of our car refused to obey. Punctured, trapped, outside, she appeared again. Her figure twisted with malice. Her breathing was ragged. Eyes blazing red like molten coals. "You'll pay for that," she hissed, voice low, venomous. "Every filthy hand, every cockroach family member you'll burn." Thomas bolted from the car, fury igniting inside him. But the choice was grim. Face her madness or protect our children and hope for outside help. As he approached, the woman struck with precision and cruelty. A taser ignited, striking his side, an iron pipe crushing his knee. He fell, screaming, helpless. The image seared itself into my mind. The woman, stalking him like prey, pressing her foot into his face as if stamping out life itself. I moved to intervene, a surge of adrenaline propelling me forward, but pain and fear collided. A strike to my abdomen sent me sprawling, my own knee battered beneath her iron pipe. Each blow rang in my ears, each scream of Thomas and the children blending into a chaotic symphony of terror. The world was reduced to this narrow corridor of violence, each second a trial of endurance. Then the gasoline appeared, a bucket of potential fire, held in her shaking hands. I saw it pour over the car, the threat of instant immolation, a tangible shadow looming over our family. Thomas and I crawled, desperate, our bodies aching, our hearts hammering against the inevitability of doom. Time seemed to slow the lighter poised in. Her fingers, a spark away from annihilation. I realized then that fear alone could not win this night. We had to act, or the darkness would consume us. Thomas gathered himself despite the pain, his eyes meeting mine with a silent decision. We would fight, survive, and protect our children at all costs. He lunged, trying to intercept her. But her movements were like liquid wrath, swift and unpredictable. And then, unexpectedly, salvation arrived. A man rammed into her, knocking her off balance, while another woman opened the car doors, pulling the children free. The crowd, alerted by our screams, surged forward. There were only a few witnesses in the store, yet the collective weight of their presence fractured her dominance. The police arrived in moments, restraining the woman, who struggled violently like a trapped animal, her rage echoing against the walls. As she was led away, Thomas and I collapsed beside the car, trembling, exhausted, but alive. The children clung to us, still wide-eyed, trying to comprehend the horror they had narrowly escaped. The store, once a sanctuary of cheap treasures and family outings, now held the residue of violence, a memory etched into its shelves and fluorescent lights. In the days that followed, reality and consequence entwined. The woman's family offered us money to avoid pressing charges, a temptation, but one that felt wrong. Justice could not be bought, not after the terror she had inflicted. Our story became known in the neighborhood and beyond, and slowly, assistance arrived. Donations, meals, support from strangers who understood the fragility of safety and the need to protect what little we had. And the woman, she faced the full weight of her actions, disinherited by her family. She would know labor for the first time in her life, a bitter correction for the cruelty she had unleashed. The courts ensured she would not escape the consequences, and the community's awareness meant that she could no longer strike without eyes upon her. Yet even with justice served, I could not forget the fire in her eyes, the veins that pulsed with unchecked fury. That night remained alive in memory, a haunting reminder of how thin the veil between ordinary life and chaos truly is. The Dollar Tree, once a haven, had become a battleground, a place where innocence collided with obsession, and survival demanded courage beyond the ordinary. We returned home, exhausted, battered, but unbroken. Thomas held me close, our children nestled against us, their breathing finally calm. The shadow of the past lingered, but so did hope, fragile and resilient, a testament to the bonds that had carried us through a night of terror. The woman's rage had threatened to destroy us, yet in facing it together, we discovered a strength that could not be extinguished. Do you feel that shiver crawling down your spine? That prickling sensation at the back of your neck that whispers, something isn't right? If you do, then you're already part of this story, and you don't even realize it yet. Think about it. How often have you wandered into a seemingly ordinary place, thinking nothing could harm you? A store, a street, a quiet corner, all familiar, all safe, until suddenly, the world shifts, and you notice the eyes. The watching eyes. The shadow that wasn't there before. That's the moment horror finds you. That's the moment we thrive. If you've been following along, you know the unsettling truth: danger lurks in the mundane. Dollar stores, local streets, empty parking lots, even the comfort of your own family routine, they can all become the stage for a nightmare. You've witnessed it with the mother, frantic with her unborn child, as a sinister figure stalks her through the aisles. You've seen the innocuous bicycle ride twist into a chase through darkness, every step echoing with the intent to harm. And who could forget the horror of that creature emerging from the shadows, defying nature itself, with claws, teeth, and a bloodthirsty hunger? Horror doesn't announce itself. It doesn't knock politely. It creeps, whispers, and waits until you let your guard down. And here's the chilling truth. It doesn't care if you're young or old, rich or poor, strong or weak. The moment you think you're safe, it's already in the room with you. The moment you think you're alone, it's already watching. And if you stay with us here, you'll feel it too. The tingling fear, the sudden rush of adrenaline, the heart-stopping anticipation that freezes your blood. Do you hear that faint creak? That subtle shuffle of feet that don't belong to anyone in the room? Maybe it's your imagination, or maybe it's the beginning. Because here's what we know. Real horror is drawn from the unexpected, from the ordinary twisted into the unthinkable. Every sound, every shadow, every glance behind your shoulder could be the key to survival or the last thing you ever experience. Imagine walking down a familiar street, smiling at neighbors, unaware that someone, something, is silently tracking your every move. A week from now, a month, a year, you might look back and realize how close you came to an encounter that would change your life forever. And this is why we do what we do here. Each story, each chilling encounter, is not just entertainment, it's a warning. A pulse of fear meant to awaken the instinct buried deep inside you. Horror is not just about monsters. It's about people, circumstances, and moments when reality becomes unrecognizable. Like the woman who was pushed too far, whose fury became a tangible, unstoppable force. Like the mother racing to protect her family from a relentless, unhinged adversary. Like the creature that stalked the night, a nightmare made flesh. Every single account reminds us, safety is fleeting, and the world is darker than it seems. Now, imagine yourself in these stories. Place yourself in that parking lot. Hear the echo of footsteps behind you. Smell the wet asphalt. Feel your heart hammering as a shadow moves closer. Can you hear the maniacal laugh, the shrill scream of terror, the subtle creak of a hidden predator? This is not fiction, it is possibility. And this is why you need to stay alert, to follow closely, to witness every twist, every panic-stricken escape, every near-death encounter. Every video we post is a portal into that fear, a chance to test your courage, a way to confront darkness without leaving the safety of your screen, if you dare. Because here's the thing, horror is contagious. The more you see, the more your mind prepares, the more your senses sharpen. Every subscriber, every viewer, every comment, every like, it's a signal, a warning, a pact. We're here together, facing the unknown, holding our breaths, waiting for the inevitable moments when calm turns into chaos. And if you are not ready, the fear will find you anyway. But if you are ready, if your heart pounds at the first hint of dread, if your eyes widen at the whisper of something unseen, then you belong here with us. You understand what it feels like when the ordinary becomes horrifying, when safety is an illusion, and when survival depends on one simple truth: vigilance. So, don't just watch, engage, subscribe, join the community that faces the darkest corners, the shadowed aisles, the cold stares of strangers who shouldn't be there. Comment your experiences. Share your fears. Tell us what made your skin crawl tonight, because every story we tell is only half the terror. The other half is in your mind, waiting to strike when you least expect it. Horror is not for the faint of heart. It's for those who feel alive when the lights flicker, who shiver when a shadow passes too quickly, who hear that subtle movement behind them and don't look away. If you're brave enough to step into the darkness, to witness the chilling stories that could happen anywhere, then subscribe, watch, and stay with us. Because the next shadow, the next whisper, the next scream could be right outside your door. And when it comes, you'll be ready. Dare to follow, dare to witness, dare to survive.